As I mentioned, the Eurozone is still a danger zone. Here is the evidence. Italian bond yields reached 7%. I want you to remember, that's the threshold that broke the bank for Greece and for Ireland last year. We have seen Italy surpass that twice in just a few days. Now, also, Italy's largest bank, if you're measuring it by assets, and one of the more weakly capitalized in all of Europe, it's called UniCredit. It's announced it's going to try to raise $10 billion in capital and cut thousands of jobs. It suffered some losses from Greece, from haircuts. Now, it also sounds like the European Union is going after the credit ratings agencies. They want to allow investors to sue them, and they want them to warn bond issuers of a change in ratings ahead of publishing it. Now, the solution to the Eurozone's problems, the task at hand, according to Angela Merkel of Germany, is this. The task of our generation is to complete economic and monetary union and build political union in Europe, step by step. That does not mean less Europe. It means more Europe. That's something she just said at the annual conference of her political party. But, au contraire, said my guest, Nigel Farage. He is a European member of parliament. To call him a Eurosceptic is to put it lightly. He is talking about a year ago about this in parliament. I want to play you a little bit of what he said.
Increasingly, people are saying, we don't want that flag, we don't want the anthem, we don't want this political class, we want the whole thing consigned to the dustbin of history.
I spoke to him today, and I asked him for us to go to that dustbin of history. Because Europe, before the EU, saw centuries of conflict and war and famine. The EU was the first real attempt to unify the continent through diplomacy instead of war. So I asked him, is there nothing that should be salvaged of the last 60 years of integration? Here's what he said.
Well, don't forget that communism was supposed to make the lot of ordinary people better, and in Soviet Russia it made it increasingly worse, and the European Union was based on the fact that France and Germany fought each other in 3 vicious wars in the space of 60 years, and the idea was if you abolish nation states, suddenly everybody will be at peace with each other if they're unified under one flag. We seem to have forgotten. We did this in the early 1920s with the Balkans. We called it Yugoslavia, and that broke apart in violent conflict. You cannot create a United States of Europe without the consent of the people. That consent has never been sought. So what we should be doing, if we want to make sure that Europe is free from wars and free from some of those awful conflicts that we've seen, is to make sure that we foster democracy. Democratic, mature European nation states do not go to war with each other. And what we are now doing is we're imposing upon people through the euro and other measures a new political union that is undesired, unwanted, and what's happened just in the last few months is many of the old enmities have flared up again. We're headed in the wrong direction.
And I want to get more to that, but I want to bring up then another concern that was that the EU was born out of, and that was, of course, to contain Germany after the devastation it caused in World War II. You say that mature democracies don't go to war, but you, as an opponent of federalism, aren't you afraid of Germany? And when I say that, I don't mean literally Germany, perhaps. I mean the reemergence of a player like that who tries to use force for control on the continent.
There has not been, since 1945, any public appetite or any public figure in Germany that has suggested that they should invade other states, that has been keen on remilitarizing. I mean, actually, I think much of this is actually rather insulting to Germany. Yes, they did some ghastly things. I don't think since 1945 there has been a more peace-loving country in the world than Germany. Ironically, what has happened through the Euro project, because the Germans are really rather efficient, are very good at industry and manufacturing, ironically, economically, they are now taking over the whole of the Eurozone. And I think Mrs. Merkel finds herself a somewhat reluctant top dog and boss in Europe today.
But as far as just, I didn't mean necessarily Germany specifically, but more broadly, the reemergence of a player like that who tries to use force for control on the continent. You're not afraid of that at all if there's disintegration?
Look, when you strip from people democracy, when you take away from people their ability through the ballot box to determine their own future, you leave them with only one option, and that option is civil disobedience or civil disorder. And I am very strongly of the thought that if we continue with this project, trying politically to unify all these countries under a government that we can't even elect and we can't even get rid of, that people will take matters into their own hands. So far from this leading to peace and harmony, it's actually doing the opposite, and it will see, and it's beginning to see already, the re-emergence of the very extreme nationalisms that caused the problem in the first place. This is not going to work. If we want to have a Europe of trade, democracy, cooperation, but that being done by sovereign governments, hard and fired by their own people, well, that is a perfectly reasonable proposition. But the idea, you know, that a country like mine gives away control of its parliament to people like Mr. Barroso and Herman Van Rompuy, people we can't vote for, I'm sorry, it's just not acceptable.
And you think this is headed further in the wrong direction, but I want to talk about a disintegration scenario and how you envision the next 10 to 20 years if that does happen. As far as the reemergence of old divides, the emergence of new divides, it's something you're kind of touching upon, but what will the next 10 to 20 years actually look like?
Well, the irony, of course, is that the euro is making the Greeks slag off the Germans. You know, they're burning European flags in Athens with swastikas drawn on them. There are cartoons appearing in Greek newspapers of Angela Merkel wearing swastikas and Nazi uniforms. And in Germany, you get the tabloid press in Germany saying that the Greeks are corrupt, lazy and useless. So actually what the euro is doing, it's making us all dislike each other very much more than before. Where are we going from here? I mean, look, those Mediterranean countries were never ever going to fit into an economic and monetary union with countries like the Netherlands and Germany. We are now seeing the price of that. Countries that are trapped inside a currency that is probably 60 to 70% overvalued for their needs, and they're now being told, when they've already got an economy that is decreasing at a rate of 5% a year, they must take further massive austerity measures. The Eurozone, as it's currently constructed, is going to break up. The only question is, does it break up in a disorderly fashion, or does it break up in an orderly fashion? And what we are urging here is that if we really were good Europeans, we'd be helping Greece to go back to the drachma, to get a devaluation, to stop massive capital flight from that country. I want to see an orderly breakup of the euro, but at the moment, nobody here can admit they've got it wrong, and they're doing everything they can to maintain this project.
Well, it's interesting that you bring that up, because you're actually one of the few people who are very vocal about actual ways that countries could exit the euro. So specifically, how do you see this happening?
Well, I mean, I've been urging the bosses in Europe for the last year and more, please can we have a plan B? Please can we have a contingency plan? Now, you know, we've started some work on this. We held a conference here a month ago with a couple of senior German economists putting forward ideas as to how we can help Greece, Portugal and other countries get back to their own currencies. There's been a big prize put up of $250,000 for somebody that can find the right solution. There is still a lot of work to do on this, but I think we need to urgently focus on it, because it's increasingly clear that what we're doing, you know, we're crucifying Greece. We're leading to, you know, a huge level of civil disorder, and something's got to be done. So I haven't yet got the perfect solution, but I'm trying to find it.
Is there anything you can tell us? Because just obviously the mainstream kind of consensus is that any kind of exit from the euro would be very disorderly, would be chaotic, would be horrible. So is there anything you can point us to specifically for an exit from the euro?
Well, if we carry on down the current route, we're going to find the markets overwhelming us, with questions now being asked about Italy, potential questions being asked about France and its AAA rating. So the current course we're headed down is the one that will lead to real chaos. For Greece to get back to her own currency, I'm afraid banks in France and Germany and the UK are going to effectively have to write off the debt and give Greece a blank sheet of paper. Yes, it will cost us money in the short term, but to give Greece a devaluation of 60 or 70%, to give Greece the opportunity to get back to a form of democratic government that they might have some respect for, I think is the only possible route.
I just want to quickly ask you, obviously you're sitting in the UK, obviously the European and Eurozone crisis is top of mind for you, but sitting here in the United States, obviously a lot of similarities in terms of debt, a lot of similarities in terms of just obviously our economies are very much intertwined. Do you see any lessons for the United States in all of this?
No, not really. I think you've made your own mistakes. Just as in many ways in Europe we have. It was you guys that, under Greenspan and Clinton, got rid of the Glass-Steagall Act. We did much the same. We've made catastrophic errors with our banking industry. Our governments have worked on the basis that you can go on borrowing forever. The day of reckoning is nigh. And I have to say, when I look at Mr. Obama, he just doesn't seem to recognise that national debt is a serious issue in America, just as it is in Europe. We haven't got governments that are realistic. We haven't got governments that are being truthful, frankly, with the people. There is worse to come. There are very hard times ahead. But at least America, it's a democratic state, and at least you've got the chance to vote for a different president if you want one. The poor people of Greece have got nothing like that.
We also have an expansion of executive powers in our country as well, but it sounds like a plague on both of our houses. I appreciate you being on this show, Mr. Farage.
Thank you very much.
Now, our interview did not end there. I continued talking to Nigel Farage, and you can watch our entire interview online at youtube.com/Capital account. You'll definitely want to check it out. We talked more about Europe and also the UK, where he hails from. So go to our website and watch that.